Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next session on our expert discussions on the topic of data as the fourth pillar. Today, Sid and myself, we are very much fortunate to have an industry expert, stalwart Tom Redman, to our discussion. So, welcome, Tom, to our session.
Thank you for having me and congratulations on your book.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Really appreciate it. I look forward to you reading it and in details and get your feedback as well. So Tom, as we kick off, if you could, for the audience or the listeners, introduce yourself, and you have been a stalwart in the data quality domain. So please, if you may kick it off.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, look, many know me as the data doc. I picked up that name somewhere along the way. I've been working in data quality longer than I care to admit, and sort of, two things. I mean, one is I've been lucky enough to work with some of the companies that are really trying to push the envelope when it came to data quality, and so sort of grounded in what actually works. And a lot of people sort of, thinking about it in their office don't come up with the same kind of ideas about what actually works. And then I've really been blessed over the years to work with some great editors who have helped me shape what I've learned into things that, are not just for the technical community, but for the business community as well.
Wow, awesome. That's really good. And what are the key top challenges that you see with in terms of the data quality? As you have been a doctor, I'm sure you have diagnosed multiple organizations beyond being the doctor. So what is the common thread that you have observed in your experience?
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, bad data is eating companies alive. And there's it's sort of, you can have all kinds of stats you want, right? Only 3% of data meets basic standards, right? The cost of the organization, a McKinsey figure puts it at 30% of people's time is dealing with data issues, right? And of course, just in terms of going forward with AI, it's just so much harder to make AI work on the data, with the data that we have available. Now the main problem is organizations are perfectly happy to make mistakes in one part of the organization and then try to correct them in another part. And so a lot of times I like to center this around sales and what salespeople do. It's they have hard jobs. Essentially, they're trying to take leads that they get from marketing and turn those leads into customers and orders. And but when you dig in and you talk to salespeople, you say, well, what do you do with your day? And they'll say, well, we spend 2 or 3 hours a day trying to clean up the leads data that we get from marketing. And then somehow it's kind of like, okay, well, that's okay, right? They send us bad stuff and we correct it. And it somehow never occurs to them that, well, maybe you ought to reach out and talk to them about what you really need, right? Put yourself in the position of being a good customer, right? Help them become a good creator and make that investment such that you can start getting better and better quality data in. And I find that I don't want to say all the time, but like almost all the time, people step into roles as data creators and data customers, then quality improves very, very quickly. And it's really interesting because people are already in those roles, right? So, I mean, you're already a data customer. You're already creating data for the next person in line, and people are tolerant of bad data in ways they wouldn't be when they bought a new car or or purchased any sort of consumer good or food or anything like that. And so the key miracle, and it really is a miracle, when people get that little transition that you can't inspect and correct your way out of a quality problem, right? You really have to start addressing it in a more powerful and fundamental way.
And on that point, Tom, I mean, you raised a very important point that data quality by itself, everyone says we want to improve data quality. but eventually, what is the business purpose of improving data quality? And that's where, even in our book, we've looked at what we call as data intensity, and that may differ for different business use cases. And I think we briefly discussed this during our chats about, when we met in Munich, but also afterwards during our discussions. And essentially, we boiled it out into three dimensions. One dimension being quality, as you rightly said, being of paramount importance. The other dimension being speed, at the other hand, because what speed do you want this information to be shared? Sometimes this works hand in hand in quality, but the better quality you want, perhaps you might have to compromise on speed. And in between all of this was also compliance, and especially Sujay and me from the EU. And I think when you visited us in Munich, probably everyone was just talking about compliance as a big theme, right? And I'm sure in your discussions, you see that also as a topic. So we see these as being three pillars of what we call data intensity, and different organizations, industries, use cases, initiatives may require different dimensions of these QCS. One size doesn't fit all. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's really important point. I mean, look, quality is in the eyes of the customer. Okay. And I, by the way, I mean, I know a lot of people in our business use the word consumer, and I'm kind of pushing back gently on that, because one of the things that's, great about data is it's not consumed with use. I can use it, you can use it, right? And but so, like, and customers have a stunning array of needs. Now, we're all sort of excited about AI, but most people in most companies, what they're doing is running the store, right? And by that I mean, they're trying to get people interested in your products and services. They're trying to sell them. They're trying to deliver them. They're trying to collect the money. They're trying to order the right amount of stuff, kind of thing. But even then, there's a stunning array of needs. I mean, everybody needs data that's relevant to what they're trying to do. And everybody needs data that's accurate. Right? Then, and then the more complex things that get is people need data that, the data from this source and this source, they agree. We can put these things together and use them in a more powerful way. So I want to mention one other thing, and that is, we're seeing new dimensions when as AI becomes more important. So nobody back 20 years ago, we didn't worry too much about bias in a data set, right? But now we worry about that front and center, right? And by the way, the guy running the store isn't worried about bias in the data set. They're worried about delivering the stuff to the customer. But the data scientist has to worry about bias, and it really underscores the point. I mean, data quality is individual, right? It is down to the specific need. And just one more thing. I mean, to the point about intensity, right? There's applications where you need to know it in milliseconds, right? So high frequency trading, right? A second might as well be an hour, and an hour might as well be a day. And then most things, it's not that fast and intense. But the underlying point about, this is in the eyes of the customer, and whatever they need to do, whatever they need, that's in the domain of quality.
That's good. And how do you have seen I'm sure you've worked with different sizes of organizations. How do you have seen organizations gone about in the setting it up towards solutioning it? Means from a large organizations to a medium size or a small organizations here.
So I mean, that's a really good question, Sujay. And so far, every place that I've worked has started with a business problem. And the business problem might have been, we're wasting too much money correcting this stuff. Or the business problem might be, we don't trust this market research data, right? We're trying to position our products and our marketing plans, but we don't trust the data we're seeing. Or, we can't find the oil well that we just spent $50 million drilling and putting in place, right? Everything, I've worked with so far has started with a business problem with one of those customers who kind of said, I come in every day and I spend all this time cleaning up stuff. There has got to be a better way, right? And by the way, I want to make one other point about it. Well, it really is a better way. Think about your job and all of us end up correcting other people's mistakes, and even if it's just on meetings and things like that, and it's really hard, frustrating work, right? But people like sort of sorting out, okay, what's the root cause of this? How are we going to make that go away? How are we going to work across organizational boundaries to sort of, make all our lives easier? That for me was the part that I did not expect. Maybe I just couldn't have, right? But has been the coolest part for me is how attacking data quality properly is so empowering for individuals.
I wanted to touch upon also the people aspect, as you mentioned, and you've written a book on this as well, Tom, people and data, right? And I remember vividly the story that sticks still to my mind with the bank in the Middle East, right? So please also share with us and our listeners about different organizations types, because we are seeing a pattern coming up where a lot more federation is happening. Maybe it's happened already in the past few years, but there's also typically data management is thought of as being as a centralized functions. Then you have enterprises who probably are growing by acquisitions, and they might have a very decentralized way of working. As you said, it's all in the eyes of the individual and the customer, but there may be so many different stakeholders involved. So how does a data leader balance all of this, right? I mean, that could become an extremely complicated people aspect of this in this.
Yeah, I mean, so look, you can make anything in data management as complicated as you want. But I want to just say one other thing about quality. All roads lead through quality. There is nothing an organization wants to do today, right, that doesn't depend on quality. And as we just talked about, I mean, the central roles are customer and creator, right? And however many employees you have in your organization, you have more than that, customers and creators, because you also have customers on the outside and you have creators on the outside. So the central question of organizing for data is how do we get those people involved? Right. And so look, they're all on the outside. It is no secret that, ultimately, we have to get everybody involved in these roles. And these roles aren't very hard, but we still have to get people involved, and hence the federation, right? Hence the federation. And that's not to say that you don't need a core, right? But because you do need a core. The other key organizational construct that I'm advising people is either called an embedded data manager or an ambassador. Some people call them data product owners or things like that. But the idea is you have this core here, and then all around the wing are these customers and creators, and so there's just too many people for this central team to support. And that's where the embedded data manager comes in, right? Inside an organization. You mentioned the example we had in the bank and in the Mid East, and so like about one person for every 40 in a part-time role in inside individual departments supporting customers and creators.
What we have done, Sid and I, in the book, Tom, is that we have conceptualized as data operating model, in short, DOM, to help get this data motion executed, right? To up and then all your like your embedded data manager, etc. Those are the people, and then there are processes that you need to execute your data quality operations, your comply operations, meeting of the speed requirements, like you said, and then all the policies and the governance and etc, right? And then the technologies that is needed. So that's the what we call as DOM, the data operating model, and then we have, like Sid was talking about, federated. We have explained different scenarios of how the DOM could be operationalized. Either it could be centralized, decentralized, or in a federated manner. How
Right.
do you see in your experience working with large companies, large or small, being?
I, I mean, first of all, let me answer that question, and then I want to make a larger point. I mean, I personally prefer federation, right? But we're not going to organize for data in ways that are counter to the way the rest of the organization is organized, right? And so we can make things work with top-down, central plan, command and control organizations as well. Our organization, our operating model ought to match the operating model of the company that we're working with. Okay. And by the way, I think this is a really, really important point for chief data officers, right? They have to build an organization for data, and they have to do it in the context of the organization they're working in. And so but now with respect to the data operating model, I think you've buried the lead just a little bit, right? And the lead is this notion of data as the fourth pillar, okay? And I see I made you smile there. I want to say a little bit about it and contextualize it in Tom speak, okay? Because like I talked about sort of like, the miracle that happens when people start managing differently, when they start, rather than holding customers responsible for correcting errors, but, see that as a shared responsibility. Implicit in what they're doing it is they are seeing data differently. Okay. And in many cases, they are not thinking about data at all until, and then they are elevating it. And so look, I mean, people have been talking about this for a long time. One time I wrote a book um, that was called Data Driven, profiting from your most important business asset, right? And the notion was that data was an asset, right? But for most companies, they have not made the leap, right? They have not made the leap from, oh, this is just the stuff we use every day, right? It's no different than, the electricity that we have. We need the electricity, but, and so making that leap, right? And so the notion that we're going to make this a pillar, right? So, we can make it an asset, we can make it a pillar. It is an important expression of a concept that can help companies break loose. Okay. And so when I say, don't bury the lead, if people will give the notion that, oh man, I never thought about it that way, right? If they will give space to that, right, then they will be interested in the operating model. Okay. The operating model. But if they don't give it space, then they don't care about the operating model. And I think, by the way, we need more and more people from different perspectives attacking this problem of breaking through, right? And just either on a conceptual level or a practical level, that damn it, this stuff matters. Okay. And so I don't know. I mean, what's your reaction to that? I don't know if when we started this call, you were ready for that, but
We were ready for this since a couple of years ago, Tom, because the whole core premise of the book, as you very well coined, when we said data as the fourth pillar, Sujay and I had this constant discussion that the data teams understand the value of data, but when we go to any leadership, we always find that they see data as either, I mean, to put it directly, a cost center or sandwich between one of the other three pillars. either sandwiched in, as we discussed in Munich, it's a lot of times sandwiched within the tech pillar, with this data lead teams leading to CIOs and looking at data much more as, how can I reduce my overall cost in applications and technology. In some cases, it's sandwiched in processes. And in many cases, it's sandwiched in people, with the CDO being the leader of that. The whole notion of data as the fourth pillar, which is then, also the next point we would like to discuss is how do we bring this attention to boards, CEOs, leadership. And I know you've been doing a lot of work in this space, right? So would love to hear your thoughts as well on top of this.
Okay. By the way, I'm really glad to hear you've been thinking about it for a long time. And just quickly, one of the things that has not worked has been subordinating data to technology. I think that's done enormous damage to both the technology's reputation, and it has been counter to sort of like the message that we were, going for with, federating everything, right? So I mean, in terms of senior leadership and boards, I mean, let's face it, they stayed on the sidelines, right? And the way I've tried to get them off the sidelines is I've tried to, sort of do what, people say you got to do, which is get the success stories in front of them, right? I mean, they don't really, aren't interested, and I don't blame them for, the underlying theory and the foundations and stuff like that. But, it's HelloFresh did this, and Chevron did that, and Air Energy did that, and AT&T did this, and so on and so forth. And these are the results they saw. Right. And by the way, here's what you need to know in the background. And I think too many people in the data community, like, they make the mistake of trying to get senior leaders to understand either the technology or the nuance in the business. And they don't focus on the business benefits and what they need senior leaders to do. Okay. And so, the thing that most data people need right now is they need connections, right? They need connections to important problems, and they need the support that we're going to have some time to make those, work. Now, I know in your book, you've got a great example. It's Audi, I remember, if I remember correctly. And
That's
so
right.
I think people, if you lead when you're talking to senior executives with Audi, right? And they say, oh, by the way, it's not just Audi, it's people over here, some of my examples, then, you weave something that begins to look like it is ready for boards.
Yeah, well said, Tom. And I think what we are trying to do together, means all the community here of data leaders, is we're trying to help all these boards and CEOs understand that ultimately you are a data business. Your present and future success depends upon how you are leveraging data. And so you cannot afford to be on the sidelines anymore. You need to come and play the game and take the accountability, because you are finally accountable to the success and existence of your business as well in the future, right?
So yeah, I'm thinking through how that plays out. And I had a conversation with somebody recently, and 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 they were trying to express that with their senior leadership, and basically their senior leadership said, okay, that's fine, but no, we manufacture petrochemicals, okay, and to the degree that data helps us manufacture those better, we're interested, but the sale that you're a data business, that sale, either they're not ready for that sale, or that sale is not true. And if you think about, being in petrochemicals, all the complicated stuff you have to do, right? And some, and all the big capital intensive things, right? I mean, it's a hard business to be in. Right. I don't, by the way, I'm very sympathetic to the claim. I just, for most senior leaders I talk to, and that I have extended discussions with, we're not going that far, right? where, it's like how can you make these things better, and what are your personal responsibilities, to make it better, as opposed to, fundamentally you're a data business.
No,
Thanks a
thank.
lot, Tom. I mean, this was great discussion. I'm sure a lot of our listeners would like to reach out to you further. So, what is the best way? And I know you've got so many books that some of us has read some of them, some of us has read all of them. How can our listeners reach out to you? The best way to read your books, reach out to you.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that. I mean, our website is www.dataqualitysolutions.com, and we have info at, and stuff comes into info at all the time. I feel like I'm all over LinkedIn, right? So I'm not very hard to find. Okay, so.
Amazing. And I love your recent questions and answers series, by the way, on LinkedIn. I'm closely following that. Any final thoughts, Tom, on the book and the core premise of it before we conclude?
So look, I do want to, be very, very encouraging to you guys, right? And I really do. I think the thing that we lack most in the data business is courage, and it takes a lot of courage to write a book, right? Surely I've read it once, and surely when I read it again, you'll get 50 things. It's, oh, why'd you do this? Right? But it takes courage to expose yourself to that, and it takes courage to get out there, and so I think you ought to feel proud of yourself and go forth, right? Don't hold anything back. Uh, okay.
No, thanks a lot towards your support, Tom. You have been an expert and you have been there, done that. So we, as compared to you, we are novices here starting our journey as authors. So thank you for your support and the support of the data community.
Yep. And good luck.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.